Hello, and welcome back to Experimental Printmaking with Erika Wolf. We're going to be printing with our stencils today, which is very exciting. We get to actually paint. But first of all, I wanted to do a breathing exercise to help us relax and get grounded and get ready to create. So we will be breathing in on 2 counts through our nose and out 4 counts through our mouth. And then breathing in 4 counts through your nose and 6 counts out through your mouth. Okay, let's go. Ready? Okay, now we're going to breathe in 4 counts and breathe out 6 counts. Okay, very good. The next thing that we're going to do is gather our supplies. And today I have everything broken up into steps for you, just so that you know for sure what we're going to be doing. So here I have all of the supplies that you will need today. So go ahead and grab what you have. First of all, you want your stencils that we created last week and your plate or the thing that you're going to be printing on. And a small yogurt container. I like to get a larger yogurt container of water, but you don't have to, just so that I have access to more water to keep it clean. I'm going to pour about half of a small yogurt cup of water. The other thing is I like to have something on my desk surface before I get started to keep it from getting stained. And maybe you have a piece of plastic or an old paper bag like what I have. So I should have said that first. That's always, cleanliness is always important when you're doing art so that your surface is ready for the next time. So we have different colors of watercolor paint or food coloring. If you don't have watercolor paint, that's fine. Brushes, a palette knife, a sponge, an eyedropper if you have it. And I like to wear gloves when I use the food coloring because otherwise my fingers get stained a little bit for a while. And okay, and I also like to have a rag or paper towel nearby. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and set up your workspace while I set up my workspace, okay? So here we go. So this lid right here is to dip the sponge into paint if you're going to use a sponge. But first of all, I will use a brush. All right. So here we go. Oh, yes. Okay, so step 1 is just gathering all your supplies and getting things set up. Step 2, you're going to be placing your stencils on your plate or your surface to print on, and create a design to your liking. So let's see what shapes I have to play around with. These are the shapes that I brought today, and I think I will use, let's see, so you can see what I'm choosing from. I'm going to choose the butterfly shape because it's springtime and I've been watching a lot of butterflies and enjoying the flowers. And this I'm kind of seeing as a blade of grass or blades of grass that I'm going to put down here. I'll move this up here so you can see what I'm doing better. Then I have this large round circle and another one. Okay, and then I have, these kind of look like bubbles. Maybe I'll use those. So just play around with your design until you get something that you like. Today we're just going to be focusing on the shapes. And then next week we're going to be adding texture to the shapes. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I was going to show you. So this is what I worked on last night to give you an example of at the end of today, today's lesson. This is what your prints will look like. This is not finished. We're going to let it dry and then work some more on it. Next week, we're going to use our alternative materials and add some textures inside these shapes. So that's what we have to look forward to. And so, yeah, so I'm pretty happy with this design. So now I can go ahead and mix some paint up. I'm going to choose 3 colors of paint. I'm going to move this aside so that you can see what I'm doing. So we have, if you are printing on cardboard like I am, just a little words of wisdom. Yellow doesn't show up as well. So I'm going to use darker colors. I'm going to choose red. And make sure you put the lids back on because it dries up pretty quickly. There we go. And I'm going to use this bright blue. And you just need a little bit right now. Can always add more. Just start out with just a little bit of paint, okay? And I'm going to wait to put my lids on so that I can continue showing you. And if you have an eyedropper, this is where it comes in handy. I like to squeeze up some water into it and then do this. And I'm going to do this. It's about a half of a dropper full, but I'm going to go each time. But you need about a full dropper. And if you don't have a dropper, then you just pour a tiny bit in if you can, but you can see it's harder to control. Okay. And sometimes it's a better idea. Oops, that's a little too much. Then I can take some out. All right. Now, if you have a knife, a plastic knife of any sort, you can use it as a palette knife. This is actually an art palette knife, but it looks a lot like a picnic plastic knife. And so you want to mix up the paint entirely. And I may have put a little more paint in here than I needed, but it'll be nice and bright. Okay. And then you can use your rag to wipe off your knife and go to the next color. Red. Red seems to be mixing up a little bit better. Okay. And then green. Okay. Oops. I'm already getting stuff all over me. So I'm a pretty messy artist, but that means you're having a good time. That's okay. As long as you don't get it on the furniture or something. All right. So I'm going to experiment with that first, and then I'm going to, well, actually, why don't I go ahead and do the food coloring in case you're doing it with me at home. I'm going to put my gloves on to protect my fingers. Okay. And then I have yellow, green, blue, and red to choose from. And I'm not going to choose yellow because it won't show up as well. I will choose, here, I'll just go ahead and I'll do the same colors. And with food coloring, you don't need to add quite as much water. Okay, so I am going to use my dropper. So maybe about that much looks good to me. All right, and then stirring that up. So the thing about food coloring, it is better to use a white plate or surface to print on with it, but you can, it does work on cardboard too, but you, yeah, just like the other paint, you want to choose darker colors for it to work. Okay, so there's my paint. And I'm going to put that over here to the side. All right, so you should have your stencils ready to print, and you should have your paint. And I have 2 different brushes I like to kind of experiment with. And then you can start printing. So let's see. So yeah, step number 4 is painting around the stencils. So I will start with acrylic paint, and I like to start with, well, I don't know if red's that much lighter, but a lighter color first, but you don't have to. You can choose. We're going to be using them all, so then you just want to hold down your stencil and paint around like this. It's a little bit easier with a bigger brush, but I don't have one here today, so. And it depends on how thick of a line you like. It's really up to you. And then you can look and see that I made a little bit of a mark there, but it's okay because I'm going to be printing over this anyway. And if you think you're going to use your stencil again, you can just dry it off. So I'm going to do one more just to show you an option. I'll do a small one. So the butterfly, I'm going to do green. And I find that if you are using stencils made out of these folders, then they really only work once, and it's better if you let them, I mean, you just have to let them dry in between. So, because they come up a little bit more than the cardboard does. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint around this one, and then I'm just going to let it set there. Okay. Okay, so I will just let that set and start in with the watercolor. Maybe I'll try, I mean, not the watercolor, the food coloring, silly me. Okay, so food coloring, I'll start with red again. And show you, maybe I'll do this shape here. It's a smaller shape. So I don't know if you can tell much of a difference, but it is more liquidy. It's a little bit more, a little thinner. Who knew you could paint with food coloring? I didn't know. You learn something new when you're forced to. Yeah, it's nice to know that you can make art with things that are just hanging around your house. So there's that shape. Now, I'm going to invite you to get your supplies out, and if you haven't already, start printing with your stencils from last week. Yeah, if you're still working on your design, then you can, just ask yourself, which shapes do you like next to each other? How far away do you like the shapes? Do you want your picture to be balanced, like symmetrical or asymmetrical? Yeah, and we'll be working on this a lot more next week. So yeah, so go ahead and get started. And I'm going to experiment with overlapping some of my shapes today. You don't want to overlap them a lot today. And the paint really won't mix together a lot if you're using cardboard, because it just kind of soaks up the paint. So I will continue. And we'll have a little bit of music to keep us company today. So now I'm making some blades of grass. Let me check on the music for a minute. Well, maybe the music isn't going to work today. We'll see. All right, so I guess I should show you what to do if you do not have a paintbrush. Maybe you only have a sponge over there and you need to know what the heck to do. So I'm going to show you. My sponge is pretty dry. I'm just going to put this on top. It's fine. So maybe we're going to use some blue. Yeah. And you can just put some, actually I could use my eyedropper, or you could do what I'm doing with the paintbrush. I think the eyedropper would probably work better. All right. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water to that. And then you just take your sponge. I'll actually stir it up a little bit. And then take your sponge and dip it in. You use a lot more paint or food coloring when you use the blue. And then you can just go like this. It makes a different texture, but kind of like it. Okay. So there you go with the sponge. And if you like to, you can add a little bit of texture now with the sponge, as long as you have the ink there. Yeah. So this is what it looks like on the cardboard. Now I'm going to try it on some white paper. So here's some white watercolor paper. And okay, so I'm going to try some circles, and I'll show you what it looks like on the white. Okay, so you want to clean your brush out in between each color. And I'm going to do some overlapping circles here. I don't know why, I'm just liking the simplicity of the circle shape today. And then pick it up. And then I'm going to do this. It's going to be like kind of like bubbles. So if you finish on your first plate and want to go to a second plate, try something different if you have it. Maybe choose some different stencils that you haven't used yet, or just to put them in a different order. So you can see here, some of the paint went underneath my shape, but that's okay. One thing that I did want to show you, where did that one go? Let's see. So when I made this one, I used this stencil. It didn't work so well because it was lifting up. It wasn't staying flat. So it is really good to have things that are completely flat to print with. But it's actually okay because I can take a paintbrush and go over my lines, or I can just add some texture to it next week and it'll be fine. But just something to watch out for if you're doing shapes that have holes in the middle. They are a little more tricky. Yeah. All right, so, and then what else was I going to show you? So yeah, just don't be afraid to try some new things, check some things out. And maybe I'll add some more of this shape in over here. I like the contrast between the jagged edges and the circle. And I'll do some green. So hope you're having fun experimenting. And maybe you'll discover something new. You'll invent a new way to do this. And you can decide if you want to leave the shapes there to dry, or I like just lifting them off most of the time. All right. Okay, well, I think that you get the general idea of this actual lesson and these steps. So keep on creating and just give yourself a pat on the back for trying this. It's always hard to try new things, and you know, it can be really scary sometimes for some of us. And and then it's kind of liberating once you try it. So I hope this gives you some ideas. And also, I wanted you to take a moment to imagine what you might have around your house that you could use some alternative materials for printing next week. Remember, I had some mesh and I had some lace, and I can actually show you some of that stuff again to give you a better idea. Maybe you don't quite remember. So I'll just hold some things up. So you could use some string, or embroidery thread, bubble wrap, lace doilies. I don't know, anything weird that might be in your recycling that has holes in it makes really good textures. Or if you wanted to take some, well, this is just some styrofoam, really thin styrofoam, like packing styrofoam that you can make shapes out of, and it actually does create a texture, the bumpiness of the styrofoam. So, oh yeah, and then the other thing was, you know, things like this that you could use. Yep. All right, well, have fun doing a scavenger hunt around your house, trying to find some materials for next week, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.